Welcome to Podcast Awesome, where we chat about icons, design, tech, business, and nerdery with members of the Font Awesome team. I'm your host, Matt Johnson, and today is another episode of the Nerd Show and Tell, and we finally tracked down Travis Chase, yes, the one and only co-founder of Font Awesome. So what do you get when you mix a love of icons, programming old school phone systems, and everyone's favorite space western, you know, the one that came out in the 70s, that franchise? Right. That's right. You get Travis Chase, co-founder of Font Awesome, Star Wars Unlimited Card Shark, the kind of nerd you definitely want on your trivia team. In this edition of the Nerd Show and Tell, I finally wrangled Travis into the recording booth, basically the side office. From his early side hustles in web design all the way through his experience that he and Dave had going to Y Combinator at the time of the launch of Font Awesome 5. Travis dishes up stories with heart, humor, and enough tech nostalgia to crash a dial-up connection. So get comfy and get ready to have a nice fireside chat with Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, Travis Chase. Travis Chase, we finally roped you into a Nerd Show and Tell.
Yes, you did.
We've tried to do this probably for a couple years. I remember one time I tried to do the podcast remote, and I called you here at this office, and
it did not work.
You were having interweb problems that day, and then we never were able to reschedule it. So here we are.
I'm your white whale.
Yeah. So we've heard from you and Dave a good bit, just talking about the history of Font Awesome and stuff, but we always want to give folks an opportunity to come on the Nerd Show and tell us a little bit about their background and their life. And we've heard some of that stuff, but we can't get enough. So we got to know. Inquiring minds got to know. How did you get into the world of tech, and like what were your interests? Because you weren't gonna.
No, actually,
planning to go into tech.
Yeah, when we were in high school, Dave was actually more of the tech one, and I was probably more of the artist. So I was going to go to art school, and I had an art teacher tell me I wasn't creative enough, and that
stings, man.
It did sting at the time, but he was right. Like when I got older, I appreciated the comment. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. Obviously, I was a young kid. But he was right as far as like just pure art. But what I was able to do is turn that art into like web design. And so I went to college. I was going to be an accountant. My dad was an accountant. I was going to be an accountant. And I took my first business accounting class. I was like, I don't think I want to do this. I want to try something different. And so I changed my major to marketing. And that is my degree, is a marketing with a multimedia design. But I started working for a local startup that was kind of, I want to say 20 plus years ago. I mean, it's kind of crazy for me to say that, but we were doing like internet access for people, like you dial in, that kind of thing. And then we started building, I started noticing like, there's this HTML in the web kind of becoming more prevalent. And I was like, you know what? Businesses need web pages. And so I kind of pitched the owner of the company to like, why don't we start building, web pages for businesses? So like, we would do, I went to Books A Million. I bought a big, thick, I can remember, it was like HTML5 book that was like 700 pages and just devoured it and started building web pages, and I would do the graphics and that whole kind of thing. So I really got into that. And when I left that company, I went to another company that built telephony devices. And so like if your kid missed school, they're the ones that would call you and say, because legally it's required for schools to call and say that your student's absent. But to have someone do that, like, you don't really want to pay someone to do that all the time. So they built telephony solutions to do that for you. So you could record a message, send it out to students, that kind of stuff. And I started working there as their web designer. I was part-time because I was going to college. As I was finishing up college, they're like, well, we don't really see paying, a full-time web design, because that still wasn't a thing then.
Yeah.
Is it technical? Is it marketing? What is this? So they said, hey, would you be interested in becoming a programmer? And I had started, and I was finished up like, I think my senior year or junior year or something. At the time, I'm like, sure, let's do that. And so I started taking some CIS classes as electives in college. Wasn't going to switch my major because they had older technology, wasn't really that interested. And so I started programming. And I remember it's still my favorite programming project they set me down. Since we were a telephony company, they had a dialogic voice board. So it was a voice board that basically had telephone lines, could connect to the telephone network, and you could make it do stuff. You could make it answer a call. You could listen on the line. You could do all these kind of things. And the company had built their own programming language to interact with this hardware. And they said, install the hardware and create me an answering machine. And then here's voice application language, is what it's called, VAL. Here's the VAL manual. Build me an answering machine. Still my favorite project all time.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that because it basically awakened the love of programming for me. And so that's what I did. I spent, I think, a week by a senior dev there, and I would just prototype out, iterate till I had this really fancy answering machine.
I mean, it seems there would be a lot of steps in detail, like if this, then this, then this,
Yeah.
and this. I mean, there's a lot there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, how long do you wait after the beep? Right? Because you can listen on the line for voice, but how long do you listen for voice? How long do you do certain things? And so, so I built that answer machine, and from there, I just got into programming. I just started devouring all sorts of books, and I mean, really books at the time. The web was still pretty infant, so it wasn't like a lot of YouTube or anything like that. So you learn through reading. So I just read a ton, and just really got into development. And so it was more self-taught. It was more guided through the people I work with. And by the time I graduated college, it was like I already had tons of business classes. I wasn't going to switch my major and to go into CIS because the stuff they were teaching was even was COBOL, RPG, some of this older stuff that I just wasn't interested in. And so just finished out my major, and then I started programming for that company. I wound up managing the programming department there, and then just kind of left, just went through my career from different companies programming, but that's how I got into it. I was going to be an art student, and I wound up being a programmer.
That's a great confluence of like different things, especially now considering what Font Awesome does is, like a design forward tech company, right? Software company. So it matches perfectly all those different skills. So all the while, you have some buddies behind the scenes, folks you've been friends with for years, including Dave and Rob and some others. And we've heard a little bit from, maybe a lot from Dave about the early days and how you guys kind of got together. So from kind of your vantage point, were you guys sort of intersecting professionally a little bit?
When he was in college at MIT and I stayed to marry my high school sweetheart and go to college locally, we stayed in touch. And he had one project. He's working for his organization and they needed a website built, and they didn't want to use PHP at the time. They wanted to use Perl. So they paid me to basically write a hypertext engine like PHP, but write it in Perl. It's pretty slow because it wasn't really designed for that. But I wrote this hypertext engine that basically allowed you to inject Perl commands or scripts or like little things, much like ASP, what PHP does, that kind of stuff, and generate HTML on the outside. So I did that project and they paid me. It was for his organization. And we always kept in touch. We've been friends since, I don't even know now, 6th grade, if not more. Whenever he moved in and we lived a block apart, that we became friends. And so we kept in contact. And so we do little projects here and there. And then what was it? I had worked for some different places. He was working for different places. He decided to get his education degree. He was going to be a teacher, and teaching in the way he tells it to me is teaching at Inner City Boston. That was really tough. And so when he got out of his master's program, he's like, maybe I get back into tech.
Yeah.
So he started working for a startup, and I had been doing some startups at the time here locally with some local folks, and Rob and I had connected through that. We actually worked for a place called Gestalt that was bought by Accenture. So we had reconnected because we went to high school together. So we kind of always kept in touch. And while we were working for Gestalt, after we left Gestalt, Dave was working for a place called Kairos, and he contacted me and said, hey, would love to come on board and help us, this kind of stuff. And so he talked to his folks. They came down and met me. Wasn't quite sure. I started talking to Rob. I said, okay, Rob, if you do this, I'll do this. And so Rob and I both started working for Kairos together for this medical startup. And we kind of all reconnected in a work situation there. And so we kind of stayed in touch off and on. That was probably the first time we all started to work together in one kind of startup-y kind of thing. And then from Kairos is when we decided to do Font Awesome. And I think he's told the story before, but we were kind of like, listen, whoever can raise the money, we'll do that.
What we want to do.
Yeah. So through all, like I've worked for Fortune 500s, I've worked for startups, and kind of started getting the idea of what kind of company I wanted to run. If I were to run one, how would I want to structure it? A lot of it's influenced by 37 Signals and rework. It doesn't have to be crazy at work, all these kind of things. They're reading some of my own interactions in like a Fortune 500 situation. And how I wanted to do things differently, how I wanted to write software differently. And Dave had very similar thoughts on how he would run a company, how he'd want to build software, being design first, thinking of the user first, all these kind of things. And we just kind of really aligned there. And then through Font Awesome, we were able to give it a go. And the funny thing about that is we had worked for a year on Font Awesome, and we built Fort Awesome, maybe unfortunately named, because we get support saying, hey, you guys are ripping off Font Awesome. We're like, no.
Same company.
Yeah, we're the same company. So we were trying that. It was growing, but it wasn't growing enough to where we could work full time on it. And so that's
you
when
guys were like way ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
And folks are starting to catch up now, right?
Yeah. And so that's when we basically said, you know what, let's apply to YC. Let's see what we can learn there. And funny enough, I remember telling my wife, I said, if we get in, I'd have to live there. And, I got married young. So, I had never had a roommate other than my wife. I had never lived on my own except for when I was married, except for maybe a couple of months before we got married. So that was all going to be a new experience. I'm like, but we won't get in. Like, this is super hard to do. Like, there's just no way. And I remember when we went there and we got the first interview, and they're like, okay, well, we sit out there and you wait while another person goes in, and then about halfway through, then they let you go. And we just kept waiting. And we were like, we're going to go up to wine country. And we did our best, and we're just going to enjoy the rest of the trip. And they're like, hey, can you come back? And we're like, well, is that good or is that bad? I guess that can't be bad. So it's like, okay, hey, I remember telling my wife, they're having us back. Probably still won't get in, but it's pretty cool that we're getting a second shot, whatever that is. And so I remember going in the interview and everything clicked. Like, what answers he didn't have, I had. What answers I didn't have, he had. And then when him and Kevin Hale got into design philosophy and they were just pinging off one another, it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, what if we don't get in and nothing happens with Font Awesome? We did everything that we could do. And I remember after that, our local friend who really helped us a lot, Ryan Pierce, helped prepare us, and he just been through it all. We're like, okay, we're going to go get some Mexican food. We're going to go get some tacos. We did everything we could. And I remember getting the call and him saying we got in. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
We got in. And so I remember I had to step outside. I had to call my wife, and I was like, okay, well, we got in. I've got to live in California for 3 months. So that's how Font Awesome started. And where I thought it was really strange. The next day you have to go, and they have this big kind of orientation, like, hey, this is what to expect, all this kind of stuff. And then they're going to go down the line, and there's probably, I can't remember in our batch, but 80 plus companies, maybe a little more. And they just went down the line. And this time I happened to sit on the right of Dave, and it was kind of snaking around to me. And I'm like, oh no, he's so much better at this than I am. But it comes to me. So I stand up and I said, hey, I'm Travis Chase. This is Dave Gandy. We've created Font Awesome. We're here to take it to the next level. And we got a standing ovation. And we're like, this is really strange. And we find out, like, all these people, which were small startup people that were mostly tech focused, they knew who we were. And so it's like, wow, this is kind of crazy. And then it's just kind of grown from there until what it is today, which still blows my mind.
Oh man, I love it. It's so great. Yeah. It's funny when I know that you're just about to tell the story, I'm like, do I have this legend in my head and an idea? And then I hear you tell it again. I'm like, yeah.
It's like, it seems like legend to us. We didn't know how to handle that. Like, we didn't know, and then people would come up to us and like, hey, can our developers meet you? Could they get, talk to you? And we're like, I guess, like, we're just ordinary people that, had a little, micro fraction of nerd fame, but it's, it's kind of funny. And even to this day, I remember going out to, we were on vacation with the family, and we were at Universal, and I think we were going to Hogwarts Castle. And this guy saw my Font Awesome shirt, because that's basically all I wear is Font Awesome gear. He's like, hey, Font Awesome. I was like, oh, so I always like to try to talk to folks if they use it. I'm like, hey, you use Font Awesome? He's like, yeah. I said, I work there. And really? I'm like, yeah. I said, I co-founded it with my buddy, and we really glad that you use our product.
Yeah.
Really? I'm like, yeah. He looked me up on LinkedIn, and he connected me on LinkedIn, and he saw me next. He was kind of dumbfounded that, we were Font Awesome. It's like still weird to me when that happens, but it's really appreciative that so many folks love the product that they just, they associate so many good things with Font Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I always hear Dave talking about, like, icons, and we're not changing the world here, but one niche thing that content creators, developers, designers, they can use it and they know it's just going to work. It just works. One of our trademark things, and people appreciate that. So it is a small thing. It is a small aspect of the things that they're building, but it's really important too. And you need it to just work. And I love that there's a place for folks to build that niche thing, and you can create it the way that you want to. And And kind of zooming out from there, like as a person joining the company a couple of years ago, once you guys kind of got your legs under you or whatever, and having been in startup and tech companies before, my experience of the culture, there was always just such a grind, and as a content person, I felt like I was sort of always on the outside of that, sort of looking in, but I was like, what a horrible way to live, man. Like, and I just appreciate, in a holistic way, like Font Awesome is about a couple friends started this company and they knew what kind of company they wanted to build, or at least the kind of company they didn't want to be. And it sort of permeates everything that Font Awesome is. And I'm always sensed from the time that Mike Wilkerson was like, hey, do you want to do some contract work? So I'm like, I'm done with tech, man. I don't want to do this stuff anymore. And he's like, no, I think this is kind of different, but just getting a sense that there's like a holistic thing, a philosophy of how to do business that just kind of works. And
yeah, I mean, for us, some of it just came out of, I don't know how much, age, life circumstances play in those choices. I'm sure a lot for us is because we were a little bit older when we did this. We both had families with young kids, and we just couldn't afford to grind like you can when you're younger. Like, I get it. Like, if maybe I was 20 when I did this and didn't have a family, I could just grind because, what else would I do? I don't know.
Right.
But, I'm coaching my son's soccer games and going to my daughter's cheerleading.
Yep.
So it was one of those things where we had to figure out a way we could maximize our effort in the time we did have. That's where a lot of philosophy from 37 Signals come in, because they're very much of the same vein. And that just really resonated after working at different places, seeing how different folks did it. And I'm not saying like we have the only answer. We just have our answer. What 37 Signals says, like, there is an alternative way. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it or that it's even right. It's just your way. And so we wanted to build our way. And our way was, listen, we have to maximize the time we're here. So let's remove all kind of distractions, really focus on the important things that we want to accomplish. And that way we can go home and do the other things in our life, and not make work works on our whole life. We got families, we got young kids, we got all this kind of stuff. So how do we make work a big part of our life, but not all of our life? And that's just kind of how we try to figure out how to adjust and make the company work that way. And then we wanted to hire folks who wanted the same thing. We wanted to make sure, at least with the culture we're trying to establish, are folks that believe the same way. It doesn't have to be right, but coming here,
it's right for us.
It's right for us. And everybody gets that and works towards that. And so what they try to do again is, like, during the time they have, let's maximize. Let's not waste time. Let's maximize. Let's get as much done for the customers as we can when we're working. But then when we're done, we put it down and we go enjoy other things. Our belief too is when you enjoy other things a lot, why we do these nerd storytells is because when you get passionate about other things, even if they're not even related to tech, you will find something that you can bring back in. You will find some piece to go, oh, it inspires me to do this. Or, oh, if I applied the same thing in whatever to fonts or icons or web components or whatever, websites themselves with 11D, you will find something that you can apply here. And so we very much believe being a holistic person and having different interests, that kind of stuff, actually benefits the company as well. And so it's just kind of what we hope to have is a very holistic, lovely give and take between folks that work here, what they give us and what we give them.
And we always put the namesake of this whole series, Nerd Show and Tell. We so value folks like sort of sharing their interests and things. And we're in the middle of a snuggle now, which we've, if that sounds weird, you can go back and listen to it. So it's we go into length about what that is, but it's a sort of our company meetup that we do twice a year, and we really put a high priority on folks sharing their nerd and sharing their interests. And it really is true that even if it doesn't directly relate to our work, creating an environment where we're sort of celebrating that stuff together, it just creates a nice vibe. So that you feel like when you feel good, like you're clear-headed and you do good work, so it's all sort of connected. Right?
Believe.
What are you nerding out about right now?
All right. So I have, like, my personality, I always have to put guards on it, but when I get into something, you can ask any of my friends, you can ask my family. When I get into something, I get into it. There's no like 50%. So I keep it to like 2 or 3 things. I just can't get into too many things. Recently, though, definitely have gone down the rabbit hole, the love, the passion that is Star Wars Unlimited, which is a Star Wars trading card game.
Nice.
I was a Star Wars kid. I remember I saw so Star Wars came in 1977. I was also born in 1977, but I remember seeing it in the theater. So it must, and I know it had some runs in the theater after 1977. I remember my dad taking me, I have this in my memory, and I'm pretty sure it was the original Star Wars. Maybe it was Empire Strikes Back. I don't remember. But anyway, I remember him taking me to the theaters to watch this movie. And ever since then, I have just loved the story, the universe. And like when people say like, hey, you need to watch Breaking Bad. Probably a great show. Not for me. I'm a Star Wars kid. And when I say I'm a Star Wars kid, they're like, oh, I get it. Right. I like good versus evil, hope conquering darkness, not a lot of gray. I'm a Star Wars kid. Anything Star Wars, I devour. The movies, the shows, varying qualities, but they recently released a trading card game and it has really excellent mechanics and you can collect all your favorite characters and you can play them. I've gone really deep on that. Actually, another guy that works here at Emmanuel, we are going in July to play at the Galactic Championships in Las Vegas.
Nice. Oh man, get to the next level.
Probably won't do real well, but we're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Oh yeah.
And part of that is, from the Nerd Show and Tell, what we were talking about earlier, I started thinking, okay, what tools? So I started on my own time. There's an open source project that actually builds like an online trainer or online platform. So you could develop decks, test decks. You can help create the meta, that kind of stuff. And I started writing some code for them because now my day-to-day job, I don't get to write as much code as I used to, just the natural evolution of growing a company. And so I was like, okay, well, this would be fun. So I started writing some code and creating cards for it, that kind of stuff. And then started thinking, what other tools could there be? And so I started thinking, man, what if you had this really excellent AI trainer, like old school chess master? Like back in the day, I remember having chess master on the computer and you could really get better at chess by playing, and you could crank up the level of difficulty and it would, you could really start honing your chess game. And I thought, man, what if you had that for Star Wars and Star Wars Unlimited? AI is definitely going to start eating the world. So how do we use it in our day-to-day work that, is a force multiplier for us? And, just messing with the Star Wars stuff kind of brought that passion into like, well, how do we apply some of those same principles into what we do here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how all that stuff is connected because there was a conversation in sort of our all team meeting. We're like, okay, the way that tech is going is not maybe what we all would prefer, right? But you know what? It's the reality of the world that we live in. And how can we make this work for us? How can we get on top of it? And I love how all these worlds come together. Yeah. I mean, that's just a prime example of that, right? You're using your interests and you're seeing where it's connecting, how we need to take things to the next level here at the company. And it all informs it. It's awesome. Okay. So we always have to get into icon stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Favorite icon, go. Icons. I don't know. Could be icon pack.
One is just the old school coffee cup. I'm a super big, really deep into coffee. And that just kind of like when we had to pick an icon to kind of represent ourselves, a different swag or like a hat or something like that, I'd always pick the coffee cup. But I also can't forget the retro camera that kind of kicked it all off. Great icon, has a great story behind it. Or even the envelope that is used everywhere that is kind of modeled off of Dave's wedding envelopes, invitation envelopes.
Oh, nice.
So those are always up there. But yeah, definitely the coffee cup. And then any of the space related icons that are very generic, like laser sword.
Yeah. If you like space westerns,
space operas, there's some icons for you out there.
Is there an icon pack or a theme of some sort that is not in the Font Awesome canon that needs to be there?
Ooh. That is a good one. Oh man. I mean, I finagled my way into getting some of the D&D icons added already. A second version of that would be nice. Maybe some Star Wars Unlimited type icons would be, okay. It would be quite nice. I don't know.
Don't you mean Space Western?
Space Western. Yeah. Space Western icons, put in there would also be quite nice. That'd be interesting. But man, we have so many, I can't even keep up with how many icons we have now. So even if I said something, I'd probably go find it. We have so many, especially with Plus now, Pro Plus, these other even styles, like it just continues to grow. So they could already be there. Who knows?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I'm always on the website looking for some like, that's a delightful icon, like something I hadn't seen before. Like, man, those guys are just so great at this. Cool. Well, man, Travis, thanks for taking some time on the Nerd Show and Tell.
Yeah, anytime. You can rope me in again.
And there you have it, folks. You have bona fide truth from Travis himself that you can start off as sort of a creative guy, then dodge accounting, and wind up co-founding one of the internet's most famous icon toolkits. Who knew? Travis reminds us that you can build at a company and work somewhere where you don't have to burn yourself out, and that nerdy passion projects, even, I guess, Star Wars Unlimited, can actually fuel the vibe at work. Thanks for joining us on Podcast Awesome today. And if you want to make Travis even more internet famous than he already is, maybe share this episode with a friend. As always, Podcast Awesome was produced and edited by this guy right here, Matt Johnson. The Podcast Awesome theme song was composed by Ronnie Martin. The music interstitials were composed by Zach Malm, and audio mastering was done by Chris Enns at Lemon Productions.